What if the small copper coin sitting quietly in your pocket once traveled through one of the most uncertain moments in American history? And what if the difference between an ignored penny and a collector's treasure comes down to tiny details almost nobody notices? Tonight, we are not just talking about a coin. We are uncovering a silent survivor from a turning point in American history, a coin millions of people spent without a second thought. But a coin collectors still search for today, because hidden inside this 1981 Lincoln cent is a story of change, rarity, psychology, and mystery that most people never see. And once you notice those details, you may never look at a penny the same way again. The year was 1981. America was entering a new decade filled with uncertainty, economic pressure, and rising production costs. Factories were changing, prices were climbing. And deep inside the United States Mint, something important was happening behind closed doors. Copper had become expensive, too expensive. For decades, the Lincoln penny had carried a rich bronze composition that gave it weight, warmth, and that unmistakable metallic sound. But by 1981, the government was preparing for a major transformation. Most people had no idea that the classic copper penny was approaching the end of an era. And this little coin was standing right at the edge of history. At first glance, the 1981 1-cent coin does not look dramatic. It feels simple, familiar, almost forgettable. On the front, we see Abraham Lincoln staring quietly into the distance. Above him are the words, "In God We Trust." To the left appears liberty, and to the right, the date, 1981. A year that looked ordinary on the surface, but beneath that date lies one of the most important transitions in modern American coinage. And most people carrying these pennies today never realize what makes them different. Now here is where the story becomes fascinating. In 1981, the U.S. Mint produced pennies in multiple locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint left tiny clues on the coin. A small D mint mark for Denver, an S for San Francisco proof coins, and sometimes no mint mark at all for Philadelphia. To an average person, these tiny letters mean nothing. But to collectors, those tiny marks can completely change the identity of a coin, because every mint had different production numbers, different quality levels, and sometimes different survival rates decades later. But there was another secret hidden inside the 1981 penny. A secret you cannot fully understand unless you hold the coin in your hand. Weight. That's right. Weight changed everything. Most 1981 pennies were still made from the older bronze composition containing mostly copper. These coins feel heavier, warmer, more solid. But the United States Mint was already preparing to replace copper with zinc-coated pennies in 1982. That means the 1981 penny became one of the final chapters of the classic bronze era. And suddenly, this simple coin became more than pocket change. It became a historical boundary line, a final breath before the transition. Imagine a worker inside the mint in 1981. Machines roaring, metal striking metal, thousands of pennies flooding through giant presses every minute. Nobody there could know that decades later, collectors would examine these same coins under bright lights, searching for tiny imperfections and hidden varieties. Yet that is exactly what happened, because history has a strange habit. The things people ignore today often become the things future generations treasure most. Now look closely at Lincoln's portrait. Notice the sharpness of the beard, the curve of the coat, the texture around the hair. Collectors obsess over these details. Why? Because every tiny line tells a story about the coin's condition. A heavily worn 1981 penny may only be worth face value, but a sharply preserved example with strong luster and minimal damage. That is where attention begins. That is where collectors pause. And sometimes, that is where competition starts. But condition alone is not enough. This is where grading enters the picture. Professional grading companies examine coins under magnification and assign scores based on preservation. MS63, MS65, MS67. To outsiders, these numbers sound meaningless. But in the coin world, a single point difference can change value dramatically. especially for older copper coins, and the 1981 cent is no exception, because finding one that survived decades without scratches, fingerprints, corrosion, or circulation damage is much harder than people think. Think about how pennies are treated: dropped on sidewalks, thrown into jars, scratched inside pockets, ignored in cash registers. Most coins live rough lives. Very rough lives. So when a nearly perfect 1981 penny appears after more than 40 years, collectors notice immediately. And that creates something powerful: scarcity through survival, not because the coin was rare when minted, but because perfect examples became rare over time. Now here comes something many people completely overlook: proof coins. In 1981, the San Francisco Mint produced beautiful proof pennies specially made for collectors. These were not ordinary circulation coins. They were struck with extra care, using polished dies and specially prepared planchets. The result? Mirror-like surfaces, sharp details, an almost glowing appearance under light. And when you hold one carefully, it does not feel like ordinary money anymore. It feels intentional, precise, almost artistic. But even among proof coins, quality matters. Some develop spots, some become damaged, and some remain untouched for decades inside protective holders. Those are the examples serious collectors hunt for. But perhaps the most emotional part of this story is not the value. It is the feeling, because coins like this carry memory. A 1981 penny may have passed through grocery stores during the early Reagan years. It may have sat inside a child's piggy bank. It may have traveled through hundreds of hands before disappearing into a forgotten drawer. Every scratch might represent a journey, every faded edge, a silent witness to another moment in someone's life. And somehow, that emotional connection keeps collectors searching. Now let's talk realistically about value, because honesty matters in coin collecting. Most circulated 1981 pennies are common and usually worth only a small amount above face value, sometimes just a few cents. Uncirculated examples can bring higher prices depending on condition, and exceptional graded coins with strong red color and high mint state grades may sell for significantly more. Proof coins also carry collector interest, especially in pristine condition, but this is not about fantasy million-dollar promises. It is about understanding why ordinary objects gain meaning over time. That is the real beauty of collecting. Still, there are hidden varieties and errors collectors always watch for: off-center strikes, double dies, die cracks, unusual toning, weak strikes. These mistakes happen during the minting process, and when discovered, they create excitement. Because errors transform mass-produced objects into unique survivors. Suddenly, a coin identical to millions of others becomes different, recognizable, special, and human nature is drawn to uniqueness. That psychological pull is one of the strongest forces in collecting. In many ways, coin collecting is not really about money. It is about discovery, hope, curiosity, the possibility that something overlooked might contain hidden significance. That is why people still search through rolls of pennies today. Not because they expect instant riches, but because every coin carries uncertainty, and uncertainty creates suspense. What if this one is different? What if this one escaped untouched? What if this coin holds a detail nobody noticed before? That emotional tension is what makes the 1981 penny so fascinating. It stands between two eras: the older, heavy bronze pennies of the past and the lighter zinc coins of the future. It represents the final moments before American pocket change changed forever. And somehow, knowing that transforms the coin itself. The moment you understand its historical context, it stops feeling ordinary. Picture a quiet collector late at night. A desk lamp glowing softly, cotton gloves resting beside coin holders. One by one, old pennies slide beneath magnification. Most reveal nothing unusual. But then, a bright red 1981 cent appears. Sharp details, minimal marks, full original luster. Suddenly the heart beats a little faster, because collectors live for moments like that. Moments where history feels alive in the palm of a hand. And maybe that is the lesson hidden inside this tiny coin. Not every treasure announces itself loudly. Some treasures survive quietly, ignored, forgotten, waiting for someone curious enough to stop and look closer. The 1981 1-cent coin is more than copper and metal. It is a reminder that history often hides inside ordinary objects, inside pockets, inside jars, inside forgotten corners of life. And sometimes the smallest things carry the deepest stories. So the next time you see an old penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the color, the texture, the condition, because behind that tiny piece of metal may be an untold journey through American history. A story of economic change, industrial transition, human memory, and survival through time. And perhaps somewhere tonight, someone is still holding a 1981 penny without realizing the quiet story resting in their hands.